Today, I'll be talking with Brittni Engels, an environmental sustainability consultant on Ramboll's innovation team, to discuss her insights and experiences having attended the event in person. Welcome, Brittni. I gather this was your first experience attending a conference of the parties, and it would be really good to get your initial perspectives on the event.
Yeah. So thanks, Martin. I was really excited to be attending my first COP event. Definitely the significance and magnitude of the event and the negotiations really couldn't be understated. Honestly, I truly didn't understand the extent of the event until arriving in Montreal. I believe they had more than 188 countries with those delegates and nearly 20,000 participants. So there was definitely a lot of information to take in and discussions to be had. And I do want to note that it was no easy task. I mean, there were tireless negotiations that continued to be what felt the almost the entire month of December. The COP15 ran from December 7th through the 19th. And for me, one of the most meaningful takeaways personally was the ability to hear so many different voices and their perspectives on the various topics and issues of concerns. So there was a large range of stakeholders from country delegates, financial and business representatives, NGOs, youth groups, also Indigenous people and local communities. So I really appreciated being able to hear those perspectives of people that are kind of outside of my realm of everyday business.
Yeah, it's really good to get that broader perspective beyond the immediate people that you interact with on a daily basis. It's a really useful insight, I think. I can imagine it was quite a lot to take in when you first got to Montreal, quite an overwhelming experience to have so many people from so many walks of life. It's quite inspirational in many ways. So today, the convention's been adopted by 190 UN members, or you could also call them parties. And the Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, was one of three landmark international agreements to protect the environment agreed at the Rio Earth Summit back in '92. And this sets out guidelines for countries to protect biodiversity, ensure sustainable use, and promote fair and equitable benefit sharing. And this COP also differs somewhat from the climate change COPs that other viewers may be aware of. And although climate change and biodiversity are linked inextricably, and in many ways the means by which we tackle one will tackle the other, COP15 actually focused on the strategies to halt biodiversity loss, whereas COP27 is primarily focused on how we ensure that we limit global warming to below 1.5 degrees and mitigating the risks and the need for climate adaptation as well.
Yeah, and the interconnection between the two was definitely a common discussion point throughout the entire event. It was referred to as the twin crisis, right, including both climate change and biodiversity. And understanding that the two pressing global issues are really closely linked together, with the effects of climate change intensifying, biodiversity loss and vice versa. But ultimately, we can't solve the climate crisis without halting and reversing biodiversity loss. And overall, there was a key emphasis that addressing both of these issues are crucial in order to protect the planet's natural resources and ensure a sustainable future for humanity. And there was an echoed theme of that we really need to break down the silos of the twin crisis. Another thing to add that you referenced was this notion of that COP27 was really focused on ramping up the global warming to limit global warming to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And this concept of 1.5 degrees Celsius from the Paris Agreement was something that the world really rallied around. And it was something that was discussed quite frequently at COP15. A lot of people were asking, what is the 1.5 degrees equivalency for biodiversity? And would it be 30 by 30? And would that get enough global attention to really make a difference and have the globe rally around and support?
It's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because it's quite an easy, it's a good point to focus on it and that numerical number from a climate change perspective. But I think it's probably fair to say the complexity of biodiversity means it's much more challenging to try and get something that all encompasses what we need to achieve and what we need to do in the biodiversity space. So it's, I think, it's probably something that they'll be thinking about for quite some time. And I guess COP15 was really all about focusing on setting those global targets to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity. And for viewers' benefit, when we talk about biodiversity, this is about the variety and the variation of species, animals, plants, fungi, and microorganisms within the natural world. And obviously, it's important to emphasize the contribution and the need for that in terms of our own survival. It's quite easy to separate ourselves from the natural environment because humans dominate the planet so much. But ultimately, all the interactions that happen between plants, fungi, and animals and the various species on Earth lead to the food we eat, to the medicines we rely on. They underpin our health and well-being, essentially, and ensuring that we have clean water and oxygen are all critical contributions that biodiversity and the natural environment make. And people often refer to these as a contribution and the ecosystem services that biodiversity gives us as a species. Now, many scientists agree that biodiversity is at a tipping point and on the eve of a sixth mass extinction. And they've suggested that the decisions made at COP15 ultimately will be the defining point in which we are able to potentially save the natural world and existence as we know it. It'd be really good, Brittni, if you could share some of your experiences from the conference and from the first half of the event, and just what the key concerns were and the issues that you heard whilst you were in Montreal.
Yeah. So I agree. There's no doubt an echoed emphasis of the importance of the event and the significant repercussions of biodiversity loss. One that really eye-opening statistic I heard at the event was that 60% of terrestrial wildlife has been lost in the past 50 years. And honestly, if that doesn't frighten us all into action, I don't know quite frankly what would. But with regards to your questions on key concerns and issues heard, there was a few common repetitive concerns regarding creating clear standards, science-based targets and metrics, and also disclosure reporting, but creating these requirements in a way that would allow for an even playing field for all, no matter how large or how small of a company or country for that matter, whether developed or developing country. Another key issue that arose was this concept of the term nature positive. And my takeaway was that no one fully understood what exactly that meant. And many people would speak up and asking for someone to clearly define it. So I really do think that we need to define any ambiguous terms, which quite frankly might be subject to greenwashing if we don't. And let's see, other common discussion points included the notion of biodiversity in the boardroom. So how can we mainstream biodiversity in business, really emphasizing that we need to strengthen measurement and accountability for business actions and disclosure reporting. I guess lastly, to summarize, there was also a uniformed agreement that we don't have to have all the right answers right now, and that shouldn't stop us for making progress and for adapting a new framework, as long as we're beginning to take the steps in the right direction. And I heard so many delegates and presenters at COP15 say the phrase, "Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good," just meaning that we can't wait for perfection before agreeing to something that's moving us in the right direction.
Absolutely. Progress, not perfection, I think is probably the key thing, isn't it, in terms of just trying to make sure that everyone is pulling in the right direction. That's really interesting. Thanks, Brittni, because I think that gives a pretty good indication as to, or overview as to how much was actually on the agenda at COP15. And ultimately, it was all about these parties coming together in the hope to answer all these questions and to try and establish a clear path forward to ensure the new set of targets are ambitious but equally are achievable. So it was all, from what you're saying, it's really all about establishing these new plans, strategies and targets to ensure that biodiversity loss is firstly halted, and then we just need to start thinking about reversing that and trying to enhance biodiversity wherever we can. So there were lots of side meetings and talks where delegates shared ideas and information, and these are the kind of important discussions that actually happen at these events, isn't it? In terms of the negotiations that go on, as well as the kind of high level segments where global environment ministers or even heads of state actually make speeches in front of everyone. So let's look to the outcomes of COP15. And a landmark deal was reached in Montreal, which can be viewed as a success, certainly. So are you able to share some of your insight into what was agreed, Brittni, and your what happened there?
Yeah, sure. So the CBD announced the agreement that, by 2030, we're looking to protect 30% of the Earth's lands, oceans, coastal areas, inland waters. In addition, one of part of the agreement was this reducing by 500 billion annual harmful government subsidies and also cutting food waste in half. Additionally, the agreement has adopted the Global Biodiversity Framework, or GBF, and that includes 4 goals and 23 targets for how we can achieve everything by 2030. And some of the goals were really ambitious, and they require objective quantifications of ecosystems and biodiversity impacts across the globe. And part of the agreement actually would obligate countries to monitor and report every 5 years or less on a large set of headline indicators regarding their progress. So this might be, percentage of land or seas conserved, and just the overall disclosing impacts and dependencies on biodiversity. Um, there was also a request to establish, special trust fund to support the implementation of the GBF, referred to as the GBF fund. And ultimately, this would really help support us achieving the goals and the targets as a globe, and making sure that we're financially set up to do so. But there's still room to grow. So yeah, definitely a huge landmark agreement was in place after Montreal, with some really ambitious targets and goals for monitoring and halting and reversing biodiversity loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's really encouraging. And what's your perspective on the deal, Brittni? What do you feel are the key challenges and the opportunities going forward for
Yeah.
the framework that has been agreed?
Yeah, so from my personal perspective, I was really glad that we did walk away from COP15 with an agreement. I think we're trying to take steps in the right directions when it comes to halting and reversing biodiversity loss. However, I will admit there's always room for improvement. For instance, I mentioned that the goals and targets set are very ambitious. They require resources and funds. So when it comes to implementing, and funding this aspect, we'll need to have some more thought around. And also from a personal fear with global agreements, I worry that momentum might fizzle out, but I hope that's not the case for us. I hope that we can keep the momentum of live coming off the heels of COP15 just last month, and keeping the progress and momentum steady for the future.
Yeah, you have to hope, I think, that it does set the foundation really to try and start moving in the right direction. It's one of those
Yeah.
things, people can become quite skeptical and cynical of this process, can't they, and what it achieves. I think one of the things that I think a lot of people have to think about going forward is currently this agreement is still non-legally binding. So in the last 10-15 years, we have seen countries legally commit to net zero
Yeah.
within legislation, and I think to have an equivalent in the biodiversity space, that means that countries start to commit to that protection, and that reversal of loss is one of the most important things. And I think equally, you mentioned about the targets and the goals. It's probably worth noting that previous agreements that came out of the CBD, the large majority of those targets have been missed to date. So we really need to refocus and make sure that actually going forward, as ambitious as these targets are, it's really about meeting those targets as well. Okay, that's great. So let's reflect on this from a Ramboll perspective, and have a think about how we can contribute as Ramboll employees. So taking it back to the beginning, Ramboll was founded in 1945. It's a Danish organization, and today we operate in 35 countries globally. And our focus is really about deep local insight and experience with a global knowledge base, to try to create sustainable societies and drive positive change for our clients. And as the partner for sustainable change, we enable our stakeholders to realize their goals and navigate the transition to a more sustainable future. The new strategy that was published recently, that takes us to the next 3 years to 2025, which was titled The Partner for Sustainable Change, our ambition and our focus is about going all in on sustainability. So it's about driving sustainable change for clients, stakeholders and society, and becoming the global leader in the green energy transition. Importantly, I would say that one of the unifying themes within Ramboll's strategy is biodiversity and ecosystems. So, Brittni, as a part of Galago, who are a team within Ramboll's Innovation and Digital Transformation Group, can you elaborate on the work that you're doing at the moment and how you can help to tackle the biodiversity crisis?
Yeah, of course. So I think, now more than ever, businesses will be integrating biodiversity into their sustainability strategy. And like you said, for us within our team Galago, we're really utilizing advanced technology to help measure and monitor large areas of land. So we're doing that through the use of remote sensing technologies such as drones, satellites, pairing that with artificial intelligence and machine learning to really automate the analysis piece. And this kind of tech-enabled consultancy approach allows us to help our clients track their land, and it also saves time through the automated geospatial analysis. So we're really looking at helping with maybe biodiversity baseline assessments, impact assessments, and also quantifying biodiversity uplift or unfortunately loss too for companies and clients as they're trying to develop a sustainability strategy around biodiversity.
Yeah, that's great. I think fundamentally, one of the critical things coming out of COP15 is the need for data and the need for those insights, because ultimately you can't manage what you don't measure. So it's really good to hear that there is that innovation and that aspiration and ambition to try and help to monitor it and provide insights at a range of different levels for our clients. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Brittni. It's been really useful to try and get an understanding of actually what goes on at these kind of global events and actually the complexity of them as well, bringing together all these various different people. And I think it's probably fair to say the framework agreed at COP15 very much feels like the start of a journey which all countries will have to go on if we're to try and tackle the biodiversity crisis. There's a lot of work to do, and I think it will be interesting to see how much momentum the world can take out of that the event. So I look forward to seeing how Galago can contribute to this momentum. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Martin. Okay. I think that went well. We'll just let it. Oh no, watch it and tell us here. I'm gonna stop.
Yeah.